Every runner has a story. What about you? What's your story? Running isn't easy. We've all overcome struggles to get to where we are. Maybe you're struggling now. What is it that stands in your way of reaching your full potential as a runner? And are you willing to do what it takes to get there? If you're not sure, listen to this story about how this runner overcame an obstacle that seemed absolutely impossible. And remember, if they can do it, you can do it too. What are your running goals? Do you need help recovering from a running injury? Do you need help developing a training plan? Maybe you've never ran before and you just want to get started. Let us help you reach that big goal of yours. Here at Body Smart, we help runners maximize their performance and stay on the road. To learn more, ask questions, or to set up your first free appointment, go to bodysmartutah.com or call us at 801-479-4471.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Running Unbroken podcast. I am Cameron Garber, and I am here with Kevin Day, a former pro cyclist and awesome athlete that is here to share a little bit more about kind of how he got into competitive cycling and some of his story and the background behind all of that. So thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's always fun to hear people's story and kind of the backstory of how they got into it. And it's not every day that we get a interview a pro, somebody that literally did this as their career professionally, was an athlete and made money and made a career out of that. So that's pretty cool. I'm excited to kind of see how that all happened and your journey through that. So when did you start cycling?
Man, so I started riding, I rode bikes as long as I can remember just as a child, but I started getting into competitive racing around the age of 14 or 15.
Okay, so pretty young.
Pretty young, yeah. It was just a couple of buddies of mine that we rode mountain bikes all over the place, and one of us found a race, and they're like, let's go try that. And we went and did it, and
that's cool.
We were just hooked immediately. So yeah, it became kind of our summer thing that we would do.
Do you remember the movie Rad?
Oh, yeah. Of course.
It's like your day wasn't inspired from that.
Right.
Anything.
Oh,
no.
There was a lot of my childhood that was inspired from Rad.
That's funny.
I've ridden a lot of BMX bikes and hit a lot of jumps that I probably shouldn't, and wanted to do some things that I saw on Rad, but I never was able to.
I have a pretty good scar on my chin from the movie Rad, because of that movie. Right. But anyway, that's funny. Well, so you got into racing then from that kind of sparked the fire, huh?
Yeah. It started out, and it's a really easy sport to really get into. If you have a mountain bike and a helmet, you're pretty much good to go.
Yeah.
And there was a really good local series here in the state of Utah that had races almost every weekend.
Oh, cool.
During the summer. And yeah, so I think it was like $20 per race or something like that. And you'd go and line up with your age group or a category, right?
Why can't the runners do that?
No, now it's ridiculous.
I'm sure it is.
Much more. But yeah, the entry was awesome, and it was something that we all felt was just kind of our niche as kids. And I grew up playing like traditional ball sports. My brother was a phenomenal baseball player, and I felt like I was either supposed to follow in his footsteps or not. And I was kind of a little intimidated following his footsteps. And so I think bike riding became a way for me to escape. Yeah. Because I could do it on my own. Yeah. I didn't have like people relying on me.
Right. The pressure was your pressure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that was really nice. I feel like I'm maybe a bit of an introvert. And so that was really good for me. I didn't need anybody to practice with. I could just go out on my own. Yeah. But I also had a really good group of friends that after school, that's all we did. So,
right. Yeah. No, you can train as a group, but in the end, you're competing by yourself. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
Interesting. So when I mentioned that you did this professionally for quite a few years,
Long time. Yeah. I got my my UCI pro license in 2002.
Okay.
So a bit ago. And
You would have been
I was 22.
22?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
That's crazy.
yeah, it was wild. I made my way through the ranks, and to get your pro license, you have to do a certain amount of races, and you basically have to submit a resume to okay, these are my results, this is my goals, and
cool.
here, this is what I'm hoping to achieve, and then the UCI or USA Cycling kind of approves it and then grants you that opportunity to race as a professional. That doesn't mean that you're going to get paid or anything. It means you'd probably pay more.
Yeah, exactly.
To get beat up on harder.
Right. But you get to start with the pros.
Yep.
When you start and stuff like that.
Yep. There's like a specific registration table that you go to, and it makes you feel like a red carpet type of thing. It's really not.
It's not. Yeah.
Meanwhile, the regular world is focused on mainstream sports, and you're still riding a bike.
Yeah. That's interesting.
But yeah, it was good. At that age, jumped into it and had a pretty decent run for a little while, and then marriage and school and career all piled on top of that. And so the elite racing, it continued, but my results, suffered drastically for a good period in there. And then I would say the past 10 years, it's kind of had a resurgence.
Cool.
And fell in line with a really good sponsor, and that was kind of correlated with my job and allowed me to travel quite kind of internationally and race wherever and whatever I wanted to. And
that's cool.
Had some good success. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
When did you realize man, I'm going for this? How young were you, or was it around that 22, or was it even before then that you were like, I'm going after this. I want to do this.
Yeah, it was before that. I think kind of my later years in high school, probably 17, 18 years old. I realized I had a pretty good I had a pretty good skill. I was good at it. I guess that sounded terrible.
That's all right.
So at about 17, 18 years old, I realized this was a skill set that I felt like I was good at. And I felt there was something about cycling that brought a sense of confidence in me.
Yeah.
And I just felt like I could do anything on my bike. And so
That's
I really wanted to pursue, life involving my bike and potential career as a cyclist. And so, yeah, it was an obtainable goal that was out there, and it wasn't too far of a reach just because all the work and effort that I'd put in leading up to that point as a junior. And then as they had a category called semi-pro, which was supposed to be a transition from your younger age, and then you jump into the semi-pro, and you typically race the same course as the pros, but not with them.
Yeah.
And it gives you a good sense of how you would fare with them. And I had really good years as a junior, really good years as a semi-pro. And so it just led right into the professional.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Getting the pro license and everything. Yeah. Well, that's interesting to see how that kind of came about. How, once you became pro, then once you got that license, what was kind of your journey after that? What does that mean then once you get that license? You can go to the registration table and stuff like that, but how do you train differently, or how did that affect your life and your training and stuff like that once you became pro? Yeah,
it was a big change, and it was a lot of pressure put on yourself. And the ideal thing from that point is to try and obtain a sponsor to help get support, and then pull together funding to get to some of the races and be able to travel around the nation and follow the national circuit versus just the local circuit, and gain points. And typically these races, when you'd line up, if you'd never raced an elite race before and you registered, and you would be seated at the back. And so it was there was 100 to 120 of the top guys in the nations all lined up in this tiny corral. And we've got 2 hours or less to get around this course as many times as as the course dictated. And so if you were good, you could make your way up, and with each race you'd gain points and you'd move up in the start grid, which is kind of how a lot of group racing works.
Right.
And so, that looks good on your resume. It looks good for sponsors. And then the closer you can start to the front, the more likely you are to stay up in that area.
Yeah.
Avoid all the carnage in the back.
Yeah, I'm sure every start there's all kinds of stuff.
It was bad. I took multiple spills and crashes on start lines and been run over, and you wake up and make sure you're not going the wrong direction.
Broken bikes, broken bones, all kinds of stuff. Yeah. So, interesting.
Yeah.
So, okay. So that's interesting to see, like, started training. How, for the amount of hours you spend, like, in an actual competition, what was kind of the iceberg of that, of your training? How did that affect your training?
It was a lot of time spent on the bike, and being, like a newlywed and going to college and stuff like that. There was a lot of probably sacrificed sleep that went into it, which in hindsight was the wrong thing to do. But it was, you're young and you're just trying to push forward and get through college and hopefully, maybe make a chance to make a living riding bikes. Cause there was, back then there was quite a few people that were doing it and making a pretty good living at it. And so that was, the ultimate goal was to get a sponsor, to get a salary and race bikes for a living for as long as I could. And then, but it was, there was just so much going on, and you're competing against these guys who that is their job, and meanwhile you're living life and all that other stuff. I'm not saying that these guys didn't have anything else going on in their life, but it was a little bit different.
Well, and definitely with wife and kids, that throws a big kink in the works. Not that that's a bad thing. No. But it just is, and I met Kevin through his wife, Shannon, who played tennis in high school with my wife, Shannon. And so, I know that, like, family and things like that was an important thing to you, and that may be different than a lot of your competitors that at the same age probably didn't have wife, kids, family, didn't have to go, well, what's my backup plan if this doesn't work, right? They were able to maybe go all in a different way, right? Yeah. And so that maybe on the mental aspect of the game changed things a bit. Huh?
Yeah, it really did. It got to a point where, you're working so hard and you're sacrificing a lot, and bless Shannon's heart, she was working so hard and sacrificing her time and weekends and stuff for these bike races. And it was wonderful. And we got to travel all over and meet new people and see cool places and stay cool places. But after each race, it was just a total beatdown because of all the other life pressures and things like that. And so it definitely was. There were a lot of sacrifices that we would make as from a family or just personally, staying up late to get schoolwork done, and then hopping on the trainer at like 11 o'clock at night and riding for 2 hours, thinking that was going to be the best because I didn't get my training right. It was like, I probably should have slept.
But in hindsight, maybe sleep was more important at that point. Huh?
But it's like, I know that guy that got like 15th place, he got a ride today. So I got to get my ride in today, make my way through.
That would be a tough balance to kind of see where all that, what the right thing to do is. There's probably no right way to do it, to be honest. But interesting. So as you were going through the journey, kids and everything, you mentioned that Shannon was a good support. In what ways did she help you? How did she support you?
Oh man, she got baptism by fire when we were dating. She showed up to a mountain bike race, and my dad they have like feed zones at the race where, you're generally doing laps. And so ideally you're carrying as little food or water as possible. And then you grab some each feed zone. And my dad was very particular about how feed zones worked. And Shannon, her first race that she came to, was in charge of the feed zone because my dad wasn't there.
Oh.
And she botched it. And it was awesome though. Like, she wasn't ready because I think she was also helping out the race director. So she had a lot on her mind. It was a big task for her first, time at bat. And she wasn't ready for me. And I had to circle back and come get my nutrition because it was like I couldn't go out and do another lap without it. And she was a little distraught, but I was like, no, it's all right. It's, it worked out. It's okay. But so she was a little embarrassed to give the report to my dad after that, how it went. But she's so good in structure and her way of thinking and solving problems. Like the next time, like she did the feed zone like better than anybody ever has. So she was always, she's like the right hand man, the best team captain, the best soigneur. Like she washing bottles and filling bottles and getting the right nutrition and making sure laundry was done. Like
that's awesome.
It was great. I absolutely couldn't have done it without her. And then oftentimes people would come to her and ask if she could feed them in the feed zone too. I think at one point she had probably like 10 individuals at one race that she color coded bottles and had stickers and
that's crazy.
Yeah, it was great, but she nailed it every time.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So that in my own personal journey, with building up a small business and things like that, I know my wife has been like seriously my rock and encouraging me to pursue a dream that kind of was a little crazy. Here I went like, let's actually fire all of the employees. When I first bought the business, fired all the employees and fired all the insurance companies and was like, we're going to go cash based and this is how I want to do it. And I'm sure there was this moment of like, you're crazy, in her mind, like, what are you doing? Yeah. But it was so supportive of me the whole time. What did you have kind of that moment where you thought she's got to think I'm crazy for doing this?
I'm pretty sure from day one she thought that. I think the first time that she showed up to a bike race and saw like this many grown men in like spandex and what is this world?
Right.
But yeah, I'm sure there were plenty of times where she was just like, why are we doing this? Like, and those days where, like you win some, but you lose a lot more. And
sure.
There's so many times at all the races where I lost track of how many races like have gone bad. And I'm sure for her, with all of the effort that she put in and all the effort that we all put in and sacrificed and spent a bunch of money to drive somewhere, things like that. And then I blow it with like a amateur mistake or like a flat tire or something that I maybe could have fixed or maybe couldn't have. There's things that are like that. And I come walking back, to the start line or the feed zone where she's standing and she's like, what's going on? Like, why aren't you out racing? And it's like, well, we're done. And so it's like, all right, pack up the car and head home.
Yeah.
And I know, and she'd be crazy if she wasn't thinking like, this is ridiculous. But she kept on, supporting it. And, we just became kind of our lifestyle too. Which I think it really dialed in our trajectory in life and family and the people that we met and actually opened up the doors for kind of a second career opportunity, the past few years or so.
Yeah. Kind of with what you're doing now.
Yeah.
So you're with Hyperthreads right now, right?
Yeah.
And that's cool. So that you feel like that your cycling career kind of led to what you're doing now. And
I think so. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. I worked in an ad agency for a number of years as an art director and, loved that. Background is in design. And, but then I went in-house, to be a brand manager for a company who supported the cycling and was also kind of the sponsor. And that was like this 6-year period or so that it was like bike racing 100% and just go for it. And we'll take care of you, take care of our marketing and branding needs. And like there was this kind of perfect circle.
Oh man, that'd be hard to find a job that allowed you to train and travel and all that really aligned with that well.
It was perfect. I feel extremely fortunate to have had that opportunity.
Cool.
And I know that like I said, that stuff that we did in the past was what kind of led us there.
Cool.
And then that opportunity led me to where I am today at
that's cool.
So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So how does that work? Funding it all? You mentioned that you had a sponsor. Prior to that, how did that work to fund it all? Because you're not. I mean, if you're 15th place out of 120 something people, you're probably not making a whole lot of money off of that.
No. Yeah. The prize money was very, very, very minimal. It's not like a golf or anything like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just I was working full time. Shannon was working full time. and I had some sponsors that would take care of like equipment, which was really nice. I mean, that's a huge expense.
Oh yeah.
Bikes and just equipment in general. So that was all provided really well. And then there was every now and then there was a little bit of a stipend or travel money, or even gas money was
huge.
Awesome. Yeah. And sometimes we'd look for people to stay or would camp, and we'd do it on the Jeep. And my dad was an awesome support. He continued to come to almost all the races as well, and oftentimes he'd just offer to drive. So that was a huge help.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So it became kind of like a family event then, right? Like kids, everyone came with you to all the races and stuff.
Yeah, for a little while, we before we had kids, it was just me, Shan, and my dad. But then once we had kids, it was like, all right, we're packing them along, and that added a whole new element to it as well.
Sure.
It's like, all right, like everybody leave dad alone for the first day and a half until after his race, and then we can all
play and have fun.
And get crazy. And so that was, the kids learned pretty soon, or pretty early on, that it was like, all right, like dad will be fully open and fully ready to rally after his race. But it was like quiet house, I don't know, and I tried to I feel like I took maybe a more relaxed approach than most. I tried to be as low maintenance as possible.
Sure.
Shannon might disagree with that, but so I tried to be as interactive and fun, and but knowing that we were there for an objective. And after that objective, then we could let it loose a little bit. So
yeah, that's interesting. So have the kids gotten into cycling then?
Yeah, we have 3 kids. My oldest, she begrudgingly rides. She does it because she knows we do things for her, and they all 3 kids ride. My daughter and 2 boys. My youngest, it's in his blood. He wakes up kind of like a happy puppy dog every morning. What's on the adventure list today? And riding bikes is top priority for him. So
that's awesome.
He loves it. He really gets it. My middle guy, he comes across pretty lazy, but I think he's got way more hand-eye coordination than all of us combined.
Yeah.
When I watch him ride, he flows really, really well.
Yeah.
But he's just not that interested.
Doesn't have the drive necessarily. No. Yeah, you never know with kids though. They may find it later, find that reason why they want to get into it. But it is interesting where you see somebody with so much talent. You're like, oh, come on.
I know, right?
You'd be so good.
Totally.
But, yeah. It's funny how that works, but you never know. Kids always surprise you.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So I know Shannon, she is an occupational therapist and stuff like that. So she, for both of you to find flexible enough jobs to be able to make that all work, that's quite the journey, right?
Yeah, that was definitely, there was a lot of PTO requests that were oh, this works type of thing.
Yeah.
But most of them were all pretty open to it, and finding jobs that generally weren't weekend work type of thing was obviously key.
Yeah.
I remember early on, Home Depot was actually a sponsor of the Olympics, and somebody told me if they support their employees, that if there's an Olympic event that their employees are involved in, they support it. And I was like, sweet, I'm gonna get a job at Home Depot. And they were looked at me like, no, you work Saturdays. That's our day. I was like, oh, I can't do that. So
wait, I thought you supported Olympic athletes.
You're going to support me? And they're like, no. I'm like, no. You're not Michael Phelps.
Not at this store.
Yeah.
That's funny. Unless we can market with you, probably not so much. Yeah, that's interesting. So that didn't last very long then.
No, I actually didn't get a job there. So
oh, okay.
I think I backed out of that interview. But I worked for a bike shop for quite a while.
Okay.
Early in our marriage, and then when I graduated college, got a job in an ad agency. We both of our jobs throughout history, I guess, have worked really, really well for that. We've kind of prioritized that, and it's one of those things that, when you have your focus set on something, then the path kind of leads that way, I guess. Because you're unintentionally driving it there. But
you're finding those opportunities and taking them when they come up and stuff. That's interesting. Well, so throughout your career, did you have any major setbacks, anything like injuries or other things that were like, man, how are we going to push through this? Or should I quit? Should I, like anything like that?
Yeah, I think as far as like physical injuries, I've torn both my ACLs.
Oh no.
Yeah, and I did them both on the bike, messing around on bikes, like doing stuff I probably shouldn't.
So not even competing or whatever. It was like
we were doing stupid stuff. And the first time I tore my right one, the doctor went in for the MRI and everything. He said, yeah, it's torn. He's like, it'll be probably 6 to 8 months before you get on a bike again. And I was just like, distraught.
Yeah,
like,
that's a whole season, like a whole year. Yeah.
And I think that was his general response was like, the worst possible scenario. And he gives that to most everybody, not knowing my history and strength and ability that was already there.
Yeah.
So went through surgery, pushed really hard through physical therapy. And a month after surgery, I was pedaling on a bike, like on an indoor trainer, like pretty well.
Yeah.
And so I think it was about maybe a little over a year later, I tore my left ACL.
Oh.
And went in, and he's like, all right, surgery tomorrow. Like, because he knew, like, all right, let's just get you in and out because it's going to be good. So the first one, it was a bit of time off the bike and kind of a big mental challenge to get through.
Yeah.
The second time, I was like, all right, we got this. Like,
yeah,
we'll
this won't be that big of a setback.
Yeah. So physically, those were two, probably the biggest ones. And then the challenge of just like life, kids, family, work, where things like just really, the results really started to fall off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that became, a pretty big challenge, try to manage it and still hold on to it as much as I could, because I felt like if I stepped away at any point, then I would lose it. I was really nervous about that. I think that's probably a pretty big concern for a lot of athletes of the idea of taking a break isn't never even an option, for most people.
Yeah.
And so I probably pushed through it a lot more than I should have, which probably led to worse results in the end.
Sure. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
Like when you're kind of in your head about it, you're not focusing on the race, you're focusing on the race result instead, right? Like, I've got to do well instead of what are the details that will help me do well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So, but then further on, like when the career like picked back up again, things were obviously really good, physically, emotionally, and things like that. And then I actually slipped into kind of a really rough patch, just and kind of suffered with depression. And it was kind of it was a long time that it took us to figure out what was actually happening and what was going on with me. But it was due to a result at a race that like really like traumatized me. Yeah. More than I actually realized it until we finally kind of came to it and acknowledged it. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this weight off my shoulders. But I struggled with depression for quite some time.
Yeah.
And it kind of rocked my world pretty bad.
Yeah. Put a lot of doubts and insecurities in your head and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. What do you feel like was the main turnaround then? Did that correspond then with when your career started to tail off?
No, it was actually kind of during like the peak of like the last bit of my career where things were going like amazingly well, which was kind of surprising.
So it was like performing really well, but then in between, having a real rough time.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And I think from an outsider's perspective, it kind of blew some people's minds when I finally kind of came out and told the whole story. And people were just like dumbfounded that could happen, because I was living like a dream life and racing and traveling and like had, plenty of time to ride and do everything. And I still was doing all that, but there was this battle that was going on kind of behind the scenes that just was really taking a toll. But yeah, it was, I think the point in where that changed was when I finally was able to acknowledge what was happening.
Yeah.
I I never really had struggled with mental illness much at all in my life. And I was
Sure.
always kind of like, I internalized things, and I always felt like, yeah, like people just need to ride bikes more and then they'll be happy. You know? 'Cause that's
Sure.
what made me happy.
Right.
And it was like, that was kind of my therapy for life. And there was times where I was getting up really early, doing my workout or going to riding, and everything was great. I was, everything on the ride or the run or the skiing and stuff was really good. And then I'd get home and it was just like
This major letdown.
dark again.
Yeah.
And I was just like, what's going on? Like, why is this happening? And Shannon's had a fair share of experience and closeness with a lot of the stuff before. And so one night we just kind of like hashed things out and we're just talking through things. And she's like, I think you're like suffering with depression. And it was like right then and there, I was like, oh, like I felt like the weight lifted off my shoulders, because I was like, we'd have found a solution, or maybe I can blame all this on that.
Yeah.
You know?
I can see that.
And
though.
it was just like, it was finally nice to be like, oh, it's not me.
Right.
It is me, but it's like, it's the chemicals inside of me. And this disease that's, this issue. And
well, yeah, it's hard to solve a problem that you can't define what the problem is.
yeah,
right.
Exactly. And I had never experienced anything like it. And so it was very foreign to me.
Yeah.
And my self-medication wasn't working, and it was crazy. And I was exhausted too, like at the time.
Yeah.
We're just, so we have a really good therapist that we've gone to.
Oh, that's awesome.
And he's definitely like saved me in a lot of ways. It never got to like a point of like suicide or anything.
Or, yeah, like self-harm
yeah, but it was rough. Like,
yeah.
and I, like it is crazy.
Isn't it interesting how that works out, that you were finally in a spot where you were living this dream you were pursuing for years and years.
Mm-hmm.
And like things should be good, and yet internally you're just eating yourself up,
mm-hmm.
right? Like what's going on? And what a hard thing.
Yeah.
What made you keep writing? What made you, rather than crawling in the closet and giving up, right? What kept you going?
I think just like I just a desire to like see the sunrise or the sunset or just experience the joy that I've had over the years and my entire life of, like the wind in your hair kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that sounds kind of cheesy, but like that was what was like, I can't shut down. I can't, as much as I wanted to. Like there were times where I was just like, I'm not getting out of bed today. I don't want to, but I would. And it was just that first step for me that like, if I could just get past that threshold, then it's like, okay, now we can coast through here and then and move forward. But honestly, it was a big part of the good talks with Shannon, therapists, and even like a very light dose of medication that actually helped.
Yeah, it's amazing what that can do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my doctor was really, really good about it. And he's like, I can tell that you're not happy about this. And he's like, we're going to start you on a very low dose, and we'll just go from there. And it was awesome, like how much that improved. Yeah. Like almost overnight type of thing. But it's something that I've dealt with over the past, 2-3 years still, that kind of arises here and there. Yeah. And, with good communication with Shannon, like she'll be like, you seem a little off. I'm like, I know what that means. Like now, and instead of being like real defensive about it, it's like, awesome. Thank you. Yeah. Like, let's make it though I'm not. Yeah. Yeah. No. And that's an important balance to have. I think a lot of people there, hopefully the stigma is lifting with mental health stuff. Mm-hmm. That, I mean, to me, it's no different than tearing an ACL or anything else, right? Yeah. That it's just as physical a thing. Mm-hmm. We just don't realize it because it's our mental health, right? And it has sometimes less to do with thought processes and things like that as it does just biochemistry at times. And so I think that's an important thing to realize, that it's not you. It's not that you're somehow fatally flawed. Right. It can be just that, like a broken finger or a broken bone or whatever, like
there's a system in my body that's for whatever reason not producing the right chemicals, and why ever that is, who knows? But taking the right medication, it's no different than like an antibiotic when you have a cold.
Exactly.
Right? We would do that in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not with a cold,
Right.
but with something that needs an antibiotic, right? With an infection. So why not with our mental health? If we need to, have medication, or we need to have somebody that can help us work out our thoughts and those mental processes, I think that's critically important.
Yeah.
And can help us, with every other aspect of our life.
Oh, totally.
Right. The type of parent, father, athlete, all those things that we are, spouse, like so critical.
Totally.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And it was wild that how many people reached out to me after I kind of told the story, who were also either struggling or knew somebody who was struggling.
Yeah.
And there was this sort of connection that I made with like random strangers that came across. I did kind of a 5-series posts on social media that kind of told the story over time.
Yeah.
And some like key parts that helped move me through it. And I had complete random strangers who were like, hey, I saw this through this, and this person or something like that. And they would just reach out, and it was really, really cool.
Yeah.
People that I would look at and be like, I can't believe you're struggling with that. Like,
right,
you're the last
right.
person I would think, And so it was crazy. And that was one of the things, like you mentioned, it's no different than having a broken limb or something like that.
Yeah.
And just because we can't see it and it's not physically like dangling from our,
yeah.
then it's like, it's something's broken.
Yeah.
And like, it has to be fixed, whether it's medically or, in some way, shape or form.
Right.
And that's been really, really awesome for me to like, that was a challenge that I had to get over too, because I was, like I said, oh, let's go ride my bike and everything will be fine.
Right.
And it's like, I tried that for so long and it wasn't fine.
Well, it helps in the moment, right? But
Yeah.
it doesn't fix it. It doesn't solve it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned the self-medication. I think we all self-medicate in some way, shape, or form, right? Everybody does. Some forms are healthier than others, right? Like riding a bike is definitely a healthier form of self-medicating than like binge drinking or, whatever that is. But at the same time, we all kind of do it. It's how we do it that matters. Mine are probably like running in Netflix, like a Netflix binge every now and again.
Yeah.
But we all do it. But how do you check yourself then to know, like, is this me just blowing off some steam and part of a healthy process versus like, hey, I probably should maybe get back on the medication or get, or whatever, like get help, go talk to Shannon or go talk to my therapist. Like, how do you differentiate what when you need more help or when it's just normal checking out?
Yeah. A lot of that has been, as Shannon is like, because, she's the person I spend the most time with and who knows me better than anybody else. So I'm fortunate to have her in there, and I'm fortunate to have a good enough communication with her that she can come to me and be like,
things are off. Yeah.
And me not being defensive and being like, no, you're crazy. Like, I'm fine.
Right.
Because I think if I didn't have somebody like that, it would be hard for me to be like, hey, you need to like change something. Like, I have a hard time taking ibuprofen if I have a headache. Like, I just don't like taking pills. I don't like the idea of it.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of stubborn that way. But if somebody I know and trust and have confidence and comfort to talk to, then that will help me move to the next step of like, okay, you got me past the threshold. This is what I need to do now.
Yeah.
And it's very like similar to like all of my bike racing and having a coach and things like that, where it's like, I know how I've been doing this for a long time. I know what food works for me here and there. I know basic concepts of training and riding skills and stuff like that. But then there's that next step of like that advisor who's going to either validate you or say, oh, no, I think this is what you should do.
Yeah.
Based on what I see and
Right. And how well they know you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That 3,000 foot view sometimes is hard to do for yourself, right? Like to look at the big picture and say like, hey, things are off.
Yeah.
Let's adjust here and here.
Yeah.
Sometimes when we're in it, we can't really see that view. So my wife is my life coach for sure, right?
Yeah.
Like same thing. Like when I am struggling with something or when I am in need of advice, she's definitely the one I go to, right? Because she has that perspective of that view and also the ability to call me on my crap and I'll listen.
Right. Yeah.
So
no, that's hard to hear, you know? I mean, it's, you generally wouldn't walk up to somebody who's like missing a limb and be like, hey, are you okay?
Yeah.
And it's like, no, I'm not. Like, can't you see like my arm's gone?
Right.
And if somebody has something, you know, going wrong in their head or something, you know, the last thing they want to hear is, are you okay?
Mm-hmm.
They want to hear, let me help. Like, I got you kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what, you know, she did for me. And every time I see somebody with no arm, that's what I say, I got you.
Right.
Like, we're going to get you help.
Right. Yeah, no, that's fascinating. So once you kind of started to at least identify the problem and start working on that, how did that affect your training and how were you able to kind of work through that and continue to perform?
So this happened, we kind of diagnosed it early spring, and I feel like we kind of snapped back into like a good routine pretty quick, although the residual effects like lasted a while and took a long time to process and really like work through things. But in general, like I had probably one of my very best seasons after that. Awesome. It was great. The racing was good. The training was awesome. The relationship with the family like grew stronger and things like that. That was actually the year that I ended up winning the national championship that following January.
That's awesome.
And so like it was a culmination of a lot of really good things that came out of it.
Yeah.
And I think just in general, like having gone through, you know, something harder than you're already putting yourself through, and coming out of it, and you're like, all right, here's a good result to cap it off with. Yeah. So,
how much do you feel like that resilience that you earned, you know, off the road or off the trail or off the course, helped you during the races?
Man, it helped a lot. I know like there's a lot of things that Shannon will call me out on certain things that in bike racing that I do, or that I'm maybe like a little bit of a pushover. I'm too nice of a bike racer. And so I did a lot of kind of research and found some things that helped me just in bike racing in general. But Shannon actually had a good one-on-one talk with my coach and was like, she's like, you need to get in his head and help him to get out of his head.
Yeah.
And just start defending himself in races and stuff like that, because she's like, I don't want him to go into the season or this big race and let people take advantage of stuff. And so there were some really cool things that he did with me. Like I didn't even know, I wasn't aware of this. He just had me doing these kind of mental exercises.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is a good idea. And it, you know, Shannon's back there like orchestrating it all, you know, which was awesome. And then I came across this article about Bo Jackson. Do you remember him?
Yeah, oh yeah. I love Bo Jackson.
Yeah, right?
I was so bummed when he quit.
Yeah. There was, and I know who he was. I wasn't like a huge sports fan, but I know that he's just incredible. And now I know way more about him. But there was an article that said something about what is Bo Jackson like off the field.
Yeah.
And he said, Bo Jackson's never played a down of football in his life. And the guy was like, what do you mean? He's like, I don't take Bo Jackson on the field. Yeah. He's like, because I can't. He's like, I make a conscious step. He's like, I have a trigger every game. He's like, when I come out of the tunnel, my right foot goes over the line.
Yeah.
The field of play.
Yeah, that threshold or whatever.
And he's like, and that's when I turn into a different person. And right then and there, that person, his goal is to destroy anybody that's in his way.
Yeah.
And he's like, and I can't bring that guy back into the locker room or out into my family and stuff like that.
No, that wouldn't be good.
And so
Because Bo Jackson on the field is
right,
vicious.
Totally. And I was like, dang, that's really cool. And so I focused really hard on finding that sort of trigger at bike races for me.
Yeah.
And it was crazy how well it worked. And it was like, I'm getting paid to show up to a race to hopefully win, if not do really well, but represent for sponsors and for myself and for all the effort and that I put forth. And if I'm not willing to like do what it takes, like, then why am I here?
Yeah.
And so for me, I found I set up like an awesome trigger system at the races that worked for me.
Huh.
And there were times where it didn't work super well. Maybe I wasn't like quite triggered in.
Yeah.
But other times it was like, no, I'm here and I'm like
dialed in. Yeah.
I don't care who you are or what you're doing. Like, that's where I'm going. And if you're in my way, I'm sorry, you know?
Yeah.
And it wasn't like, you know, violent by any means, but cyclocross is you're
bumping elbows.
You're bumping elbows.
Yeah.
It's tight and it's fast. And if you don't, you'll get bumped to the back. And then you're out. And so you just kind of have to. And,
you kind of have to bully your way through.
Yeah, you do. And it was great. It works. It was awesome. It was one of the best things that with the mental stuff that my coach was having me do, just like really set the tone for the rest of the season and other seasons to come. Interesting. Yeah.
Do you feel like that the mountain biking etiquette, like sometimes got in the way with the cyclocross? It's like, I needed to be more of a jerk.
Yeah, it totally did.
Yeah.
I think that's like, I mean, I don't know. That's the type of somebody's like, I don't know where I'm going with this. Sorry. Yeah, it definitely did. Where my personality in general is probably like, no, you go first. No, you go first. Like when I come to a stop sign, and we meet at the same time, like I will wait it out.
Right, you're always waving the other one.
Yeah, no matter how much they wave me through, I'm gonna win that one.
That's funny.
And Shannon can see that in me, and she's like, no, you're letting these people like take advantage of you. You know, there's a lot of tactics in racing.
Oh, for sure.
They can draft behind you and
kind of slingshot paths.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And she's like, you're pulling these people around these courses because you're trying to go hard and fast and you're not tactically thinking it through. You're being too nice. Like you gotta like, you know, sharpen those elbows up and jab.
Yeah.
And it really helped. Like, and it was definitely the mountain biking was a little bit more along the sides of like, yeah, we're all gonna like ride this cool trail together and we'll go fast, but but in cross it's a little more cutthroat, and so definitely had to transfer a little bit there.
That's fascinating. Having the right team in place really is important. So interesting, you had a coach that was able to teach you right things. Obviously Shannon was a huge part of the team. I think that's an important thing for athletes to realize, that like getting that right team in place is so critical. So that's awesome. It's so interesting to hear every athlete's story and what setbacks they had and things like that. I appreciate you sharing that with us. That's, you know, definitely a very personal thing. Sounds like your social media posts about it were pretty well received. Is that just on your personal social media, or did you have
just on Instagram? And I think I have a website. I think it's still up, and I posted on there. You know, a little longer format of it, but it was that I felt like it took me a bit to like kind of come to it, and there were even members of my family that were like, I didn't realize this was happening to you. Yeah, and I'm like, I'm sorry you didn't. I wasn't very public about it at the time. Yeah, well, that's not something you broadcast. Hey, everybody. And some people do and some people don't. And that is, it's, you know, to each his own. But it was one of those things that like, once I got to a point and I was like, I want to tell this story. Yeah. Because in my kind of recovery or my progress through it, I found people like that told their story. And it gave me like a sense of like, okay, it's okay if I share this, or I'm okay. I'm an okay person still. Right. Despite like this, to me, it was like, man, the ultimate like chink in my armor was like, you're not doing that great, buddy. Like, this is kind of embarrassing.
Did it help you realize how normal's not the right word, but maybe common it is, that there are more people dealing with it than you realize, and you
100%.
think,
yeah.
Normal is definitely not the right word, but
No, I know what you mean, though.
In some ways it is. It's normal to struggle.
Yeah.
And so, but it is a common thing that people deal with and battle with. And so interesting.
I think I think in the athletic world too, it's rampant. Like,
I agree.
Because this, if we look back on kind of the ultimate cause of this, it was because of an event that like I sucked at, and I had major problems, and I had to like DNF, and it was like I had everything in my heart set on this event, and I knew exactly how it was going to play out, and it was playing out exactly how I thought. And then something went wrong, and it was just like, I was wrecked, at the time. And then I got over it, but then it just really weighed on me so much, and I can see that so much. And
sure,
you work so hard, and you come up like even like a millisecond short, and it's like,
right,
for what now?
Yeah. Well, it lets all those doubts and fears and insecurities creep in, that every time you're training again or planning for your next event, it's like, well, but what if it happens like it did at that event?
Exactly.
Right. And I can see that, how that would tear you down. And I imagine it is really common amongst elite athletes. That again, we talked about that earlier, actually, when we were doing a metabolic test. We had you on the bike, and I mentioned that the injury level where high end athletes compete, like they're right below that injury threshold, because you're having to push yourself so hard. But that's probably true from a mental health standpoint, that the lengths we're pushing ourselves to probably are right at the edge of mental health breaks and physical health breaks. And, so that's probably really common in the elite athlete world.
Yeah, I imagine it's gotta be. And it's crazy that, I don't know, I feel like we've diverged a lot here, but but it's become like so prevalent to me of how important that conversation is, or just how important it is to like acknowledge it, for one. And I based on all the people that reached out and were like, hey man, thank you.
Yeah.
It's like, even just that, it was like, I kind of knew like they either needed to hear it, or they're kind of going through something too.
Yeah.
And if and when they, share it or get help for it, or come through it, there's maybe some bit that I was able to help with or whatnot, but just the acknowledgement that it's out there, and it is normal.
Yeah, it's interesting how we almost need that permission to get help, right? Totally. We almost need somebody to be like, it's okay for you to go get help.
Yeah,
right.
100%.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Thank you so much for sharing. So if people wanted to see those posts of your journey, or just follow you in general, where do they follow you?
Instagram's probably the best.
The best?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's at K-Day Racing.
At K-Day Racing.
K-D-A-Y Racing. Yeah.
Awesome. So what's next for Kevin Day?
Man, summer of riding bikes. And like I said, I mentioned to you, I'm kind of dabbling with putting in like another pretty good cross season. Yeah. I just felt really good on the bike and very positive lately, after taking probably 2 full seasons, like very casual or almost off.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's something that's always stirs inside of me that's like, I want to go race. But it's also, it's nice to take it a little more casually too.
Yeah. Not have the pressure of it.
A little more easy on myself.
Yeah.
Just show up. And
so is that still on the professional circuit that you would try to race?
Yeah, I don't think I'll go to that level.
Okay.
I'll do more of like a master's age category too.
Okay.
So,
I was gonna say, do you still have your license then? Have you maintained that, or?
No, I actually let it expire.
How was that mentally, like
it was hard
to take that step? Was that
it was
tough?
really, really hard, honestly. Like I struggled for quite a while of letting that kind of chapter go.
That piece of your identity, right?
Yeah, because I was 100% consumed in it, and that was, everybody that what people knew me, and that's how I knew myself. And then
Yeah.
it was like, okay, well, see you later. And
Yeah.
but it really, like, I still feel really young. I still feel like there's plenty of time that if I ever wanted to jump back into it, and it wouldn't take long to get going again. And I've done a few events where it's like this casual approach that I've taken, and I was like, all right, I was able to hang in there, and like I'll race with like the elites in like the local series, but on a national level, we'll go to the age groups, and there's, I'm racing with a lot of former elite guys in that same, who are going through the same thing. So it's
Right.
kind of the same demographic.
Yeah.
And so the competition is, just as good.
Yeah.
So
it's a pretty small world, I would assume. Especially at that elite level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you probably know a lot of the guys that you're competing against at every race and stuff like that.
We've gone to bat at each other a lot over the years.
Yeah.
So it's kind of fun. So,
yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for joining us, and thanks for sharing. I think a lot of lessons learned for myself and hopefully for others. Thanks for sharing your story, and it's always awesome to hear how different athletes kind of put things together. So I love that you have that story of being able to push through and still compete at what became kind of some of your highest level things after going through something, pretty hard.
Yeah, absolutely.
So awesome. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing with us. Thanks for joining us on the Running Unbroken podcast. And make sure to like, follow, subscribe, all those good things so you can catch us on the next episode. We will join you then.
Thanks for listening to Running Unbroken. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And reach out if you or someone you know has a story to share.